Okay, so let's jump into this. We have a set of sources today that I have to say feel like they belong on completely different shelves in a library, maybe even in different buildings.
Yeah, different universes almost.
Right. I mean, on one side, you've got what is basically a political thriller. There's lust, conspiracy, a desperate cover-up.
And a state-sponsored murder, all involving, one of the most famous kings in history. It reads like a prestige TV script.
It really does. But then you look at the other side of the table, and we have these quiet, almost simple parables about farming.
A guy taking a nap, a tiny seed.
Exactly. It feels like such a disconnect. So what's the thread? Why are we looking at these two things together?
Well, it feels like a clash at first, for sure. We're looking at the texts for Friday, January 30, 2026, a story from 2 Samuel, a poem from Psalm 51, and parables from Mark's Gospel. And while the genres are, blood and soil, the theme that pulls them together is actually control.
Control. Okay, unpack that for me.
It's this tension between the noise of human control, our need to force things, to manipulate outcomes, and the quiet, organic way that, true growth actually happens.
Ah, I see. So the difference between seizing a result and, I guess, waiting for one.
That's it, exactly.
Okay, I love that framework. The noise versus the quiet. And I'm guessing 2 Samuel is our exhibit A for the noise.
It's the ultimate example. This is, of course, the story of David and Bathsheba. And I think because it's so famous, we tend to skim it,
Right. King sees woman, makes a bad choice, the end.
But the text gives us these incredibly specific details that paint a much, much darker picture of power and, frankly, of boredom.
Well, let's get into the context then. The cover is Samuel chapter 11. It opens with a really specific time marker. In the spring of the year, the time when kings go out to battle.
And that is the setup. War was seasonal back then. Spring was go time. It was the king's job.
He's the commander-in-chief.
Right, that's his role. So the text tells us David sent out Joab, his top general, and the whole army to attack the city of Rabbah.
But David didn't go.
Right there. But David remained at Jerusalem. That word "but" is doing so much work in that sentence. He's out of place. He's abdicated his primary role.
And the text really leans into that laziness, doesn't it? It says he got up from his bed in the late afternoon.
Yeah, the man's taking a siesta while his army is out in the field.
So he's strolling on his roof, and from up there, he can see everything. He's literally and, I guess, metaphorically above it all.
Exactly. And he sees a woman bathing. And this is where we need to be really careful with our words. This so often gets called a romance or an affair.
But looking at the power dynamic, affair feels totally wrong.
Completely wrong. He doesn't go talk to her. He sends messengers. He treats it like a military intelligence operation. And the report comes back with very specific intel. The messenger says, "Is this not Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite?"
So the messenger is basically waving a giant red flag. He's not just giving her name, he's tying her to the men in her life.
And those men are critical. Eliam was one of David's elite warriors, one of the 30. And Uriah the Hittite is also one of them. And he's at the front lines fighting for David at that very moment.
So this isn't some stranger. He's betraying his own inner circle.
Deeply. Which makes the next sentence so cold. David sent messengers and took her.
Took her. Not wooed her or convinced her.
No, it's an acquisition. It's transactional. She's summoned, she obeys, you don't say no to the king, and then she goes home. David probably thinks that's the end of it.
Little perk of the job.
A way to kill the afternoon. But then the message comes back. In the original Hebrew, it's just 3 words. Hara Anoki.
I'm pregnant.
And just like that, the entire story shifts. It's not about lust anymore. It's about a cover-up. David's private action is about to become a very public crisis.
And this is where the noise gets really loud, right? He goes straight into crisis management mode.
Immediately. He needs to manage the evidence. So he comes up with what seems like a pretty smart plan. He summons Uriah back from the battle.
Okay, so put yourself in Uriah's shoes for a second. You're fighting a siege, and suddenly a royal messenger pulls you off the line.
You're riding back to the capital. You're probably filthy, exhausted.
And you're thinking, what? I'm in trouble. I'm getting a promotion.
Something big. Instead, you walk into this weirdly casual chat with the king. David's asking, how's Joab? How's the war going?
Just small talk.
Total filler. And then comes the real reason. David tells him, go down to your house and wash your feet.
And wash your feet is, it's a euphemism.
It is. It means go home, relax, be with your wife. David is trying to engineer a solution to his paternity problem. If Uriah sleeps with Bathsheba, The timeline works out.
And no one's the wiser. He even sends a gift of food after him to, what, set the mood?
He's curating the whole evening, but the plan completely backfires. Uriah doesn't go home.
This is the part of the story I find so incredible. He just doesn't.
He sleeps at the palace entrance with the servants. He basically camps out on the king's doorstep.
Why? Do you think he knows? Is he suspicious?
The text doesn't say. But his explanation the next day is just devastating for David's character. David asks him, hey, why didn't you go home? And Uriah gives this speech about how the Ark of the Covenant and all of Israel and Judah are intense out in the open field. He says, my commander Joab and his men are sleeping on the ground. How can I possibly go home to eat and drink and be with my wife?
It's just a stunning contrast. The king, who's supposed to be the model of piety, is acting like a spoiled child.
While Uriah, a Hittite, technically a foreigner, is behaving with more integrity and discipline than anyone. He's showing David what a real leader, a real soldier, looks like.
So David's first plan, the sort of gentle manipulation, it fails.
Completely. So he escalates, plan B. If a sober Uriah has too much integrity, maybe a drunk Uriah won't.
Which is just so cynical.
It's desperation.
Oh.
He invites Uriah to eat and drink with him and gets him drunk. He's trying to chemically dissolve the man's resolve.
But it still doesn't work.
Even drunk, Uriah's character holds. He stumbles out and just lies down with the servants again. He will not go home.
So now David is cornered. He can't trick him. He can't manipulate him. So he moves from manipulation to elimination.
And this is maybe the most chilling part of the whole story.
Yeah.
The next morning, David writes a letter to his general, Joab. And this detail just gets me every time he gives the letter to Uriah to deliver.
Uriah carries his own death warrant.
Can you imagine the level of cynicism? David is counting on Uriah's loyalty. He knows this man is too honorable to ever open the king's mail. He weaponizes Uriah's virtue against him.
And the instructions in the letter are just brutal. It's not just kill him.
No, it's tactical. It says, set Uriah in the forefront of the hardest fighting and then draw back from him that he may be struck down and die.
He's using the enemy as the murder weapon. He's ordering his own troops to abandon a comrade.
Think about that. He's telling Joab to sabotage a military mission, risking who knows how many other lives, just to guarantee one man dies to cover up his sin. It's the ultimate act of control.
I will literally rearrange a battlefield to protect my image.
Exactly. And it works. Joab does it. Uriah is killed. The problem, from a purely logistical standpoint, is solved.
Ye force the outcome. But the moral cost is total. And that brings us to the second text, Psalm 51.
Right. Because after all that external action, this is the internal monologue. This is what comes after the noise. And the tone is just radically different. The cool, calculating king is gone.
Completely. In the story, he's the one doing everything, sending, taking, writing. But in the psalm, he's passive. He's begging to be acted upon. Wash me. Cleanse me.
The illusion of his own control is shattered. He realizes he's broken something inside himself that he can't fix.
There's that line, let the bones that you have crushed rejoice. It sounds like the guilt has become a physical weight on him.
It's a recognition that his attempt to control everything actually just disintegrated him. He says, behold, I was brought forth in iniquity. He's not just saying I made a mistake. He's saying my entire operating system is flawed.
So it's a shift from how do I fix this situation to how do I fix me?
And he realizes he can't. He has to ask for a clean heart to be created in him. The Hebrew word there is bara, the same one used in Genesis for creation out of nothing. He needs a factory reset that only God can do.
So that's the noise of control, the king forcing outcomes and ending up completely broken. Now let's pivot to the quiet of growth in Mark chapter 4.
This is where the contrast just becomes so sharp. We leave the palace, we leave the battlefield, and we go to a farm. Jesus is explaining how the kingdom of God works.
And he uses the image of a farmer. But look at what the farmer does compared to David.
It's amazing. The text says the farmer scatters seed on the ground.
And then he goes to sleep.
He sleeps, he gets up. Night and day, he just lives his life. And the seed sprouts and grows, and the text says, he knows not how.
He knows not how. I mean, that's a pretty scary admission for a professional, isn't it? If I hired someone and they said, the project's working great, no idea how, I'd be concerned.
In our world, for sure, we value expertise and micromanagement. But Jesus is saying that in the spiritual realm, that's just how it works. You can't force it. You can't pull the sprout out of the ground. The Greek text uses a fascinating word here, automale.
Automale, is that where we get automatic?
It is. It means of its own accord. The earth produces fruit automatically. First the blade, then the ear, then the full grain. It's a process with its own internal logic and its own power. The farmer participates, but he isn't the one making it happen.
So David represents this frantic need to make things happen right now. And this farmer represents a kind of radical trust in a process he literally cannot see or control.
Exactly. David couldn't wait. He had to seize everything. But the kingdom, Jesus says, operates on the principle of the seed. It's slow, it's underground, it's invisible for a long time. And the most productive thing the farmer can do is just get out of the way, go to sleep, trust the process.
Which is so hard for us. We want to check on it, fiddle with it.
We want to manage it, but you can't micromanage a harvest.
And then he gives another image to really drive it home. The mustard seed.
Which is such a deliberate choice. In the Old Testament, big, powerful kingdoms are compared to these huge, majestic cedar trees. Jesus doesn't do that. He picks a mustard shrub.
He emphasizes how small it is. The smallest of all the seeds on earth.
It's nothing. You could lose it in the palm of your hand. But when it's sown, it grows up and becomes the greatest of all shrubs. Not a tree, a shrub, a big, scrappy bush.
But one that puts out large branches so that the birds of the air can make nests in its shade.
And that word shade is so important. A good king was supposed to provide shade protection, security for his people.
So let's connect that back. Did David provide shade?
David did the opposite. He used his power to pull the shade away from Uriah to protect himself. He sent a man out from safety to die in the open.
In the kingdom of God, this little mustard plant, it creates shade. It creates shelter.
Yes. But it does it through that slow, automatic growth, not through a violent command. It starts invisibly small and ends up as a place of rest for the vulnerable.
So there's a paradox. The big man, the king, he creates destruction. The small thing, the seed, creates shelter.
That's the core argument here. We're obsessed with big solutions, with David-sized interventions. We want to dispatch the army to solve our problems. But these parables suggest that real lasting change, the kind that provides shelter, actually starts microscopically.
But here's the tough part. The seed has to be sown. It has to be put in the ground, buried.
That's the scary part, isn't it? To sow a seed is to lose control of it. You throw it in the dirt, you cover it up, and you have to let it go.
Which David refused to do. He wouldn't let go of his reputation. He wouldn't bury his pride and just confess what he'd done.
And because he wouldn't let his ego die that small, quiet death, he had to make Uriah die a loud, violent one. That's the terrible trade-off. If you won't trust the quiet process, you end up relying on the noisy machine of control.
That connects perfectly to the reflection piece in our sources, the harvest of quiet faith. It quotes Psalm 126. Those who sow in tears will reap with shouts of joy.
Yeah, and why sow in tears? Sowing is sad because it feels like loss.
You're giving something up.
Exactly. Letting go is painful. Trusting a process you can't see is painful, but the promise is that this painful sowing is the only path to the joyful harvest.
The reflection says our role is to remain faithful in small beginnings, which seems to imply that we usually hate small beginnings. We want the end result now.
We want the harvest without the winter. But the sources all tell us that the waiting, the quiet part, isn't empty. It's when the real work is being done.
There's a little detail in Mark I almost missed. It says Jesus taught the crowds in parables, but then he explained everything in private to his disciples.
Which reinforces the whole theme, right? The big crowd gets the riddle. The small, intimate group gets the understanding. It's not a big PR campaign.
Unlike David, who was running a massive PR campaign to save his own skin.
It's depth over width. And for you listening, this brings up a really practical challenge. The reflection asks, what small act of faith or goodness can I do today?
It sounds almost too simple after we've been talking about murder and massive conspiracies.
But that's the whole point. The antidote to the David complex that need to control big things is to do the small, local, faithful thing. Tell the truth. Serve someone. Apologize.
These are the mustard seeds. They don't look like much. They don't feel effective the way an army feels effective.
No, they're not efficient, but they're alive. An army can destroy, but only a seed can create life. And the promise is, if you sow it, the growth happens of its own accord. You don't have to force it. You can actually sleep at night.
So to pull it all together, we have the noise of control, which looks like strength but leads to death and fragility. And we have the quiet of growth, which looks like weakness, like sleeping, like a tiny seed, but leads to life and shelter.
That's the choice. In every situation, we're deciding which one we trust. Are we going to be the king on the roof, frantically trying to arrange all the pieces? Or are we willing to be the farmer who just does the work and then trusts the soil?
It's a huge challenge to our egos, though.
It requires the death of the ego. You have to be okay with not being the one making the grass grow.
I want to leave everyone listening with one last thought to chew on from this deep dive.
Let's hear it.
We saw David go to these unbelievable lengths to avoid a small death, the death of his image. He wouldn't let that seed of his mistake fall into the ground and be buried.
And as a result, he caused a massive real death.
Exactly. The parables say the only way to get the life, to get the shelter, is to lose the seed. So the question for you is this: what situation in your life are you frantically trying to control right now? What is the noise? What seed are you clutching in your fist, terrified to let it go and bury it because you can't control what happens next?
That is the question.
Maybe the answer isn't to fight harder or to scheme more. Maybe the real move is to sow it, go to sleep, and let the quiet work begin. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.